It's lights out, everybody, and welcome back to the Low Downforce podcast, the for-friend Formula One podcast. And we have so many crashes to talk about from Baku, from the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and apparently collateral is Josh and J9 are not here. They also crashed out. Not actually. They're just both busy. So you have Matt and I, and for holiday reasons, we are recording this the day of the race, so this is later that day. If any other news comes out tomorrow, well, I guess screw us, right? But hopefully we have the whole picture. It is Matt's birthday, so in the comments, wherever you're watching this, YouTube, just listening on Spotify, whatever, put happy birthday, Matt, down in the comments. Hopefully you love his track facts. We do. But that's enough riff-raff. That's enough getting into it. We're fresh off the race. Not that fresh. It's late night right now. But it's still mulling around, as we always do, right off the bat. How'd you feel? 1 to 10, 0 to 10, negative 10 to 10. I don't know what scale you come up with this weekend, but what are you rating the Azerbaijan Grand Prix?
To be honest, I don't know. For the weekend, you might go a little bit higher just because of kind of the chaos of the qualifying. I gave the race like a 5 out of 10, and maybe that's being generous, to be honest. I think this where everything ended up was pretty cool. How they got there was pretty cool. Not that it was favorable to our favorite team, but I don't know. Maybe 5, maybe 4, maybe split the difference. But how about you?
Yeah, if you're rating it on the weekend, qualifying was like a 15 out of 10. It's the most nuts qualifying. I had enough of my day blocked off to watch all 2+ hours of it because, qualifying's supposed to be an hour, but the best drivers in the world kept crashing their cars, and so it created all kinds of chaos, and then that's kind of all we got. The race, you were definitely generous based on my rating. I'm giving it a straight up 1 out of 10. We'll get into kind of the lap 1 incident. That's really the only thing talking about. I haven't actually pulled up the standings to compare it to the starting grid with a couple different pit stops. Like George Russell got P2, his only one not overtake here or there, but then to get past Carlos Sainz, who was running P2 most of the race, he passed him on pit stop strategy. Lando Norris started P7, finished P7, There was so little on-track movement. We got, for a track, even amid the crazy, DRS is messing this up, the cars are too big, there's not enough room for overtaking. Everybody's saying this is the one track, it's got the 2.2 kilometer straight. This should be the place to do it. And then whether it was tailwind that some teams were talking about, whether it's just the way, the chaotic qualifying unfolded, we just didn't get overtakes. We got DRS trains, and it just took all of the air out of this race. Obviously, the thing that's going to get lost in that 1 out of 10 rating, and I'm going to spoil it right off the bat, Carlos Sainz got P3, started P2, finished P3. That is Williams' first podium since 2021, but if you look up that race, that's George Russell grabbing a podium in a incredibly rainy, I think only like 1, 2, or 3 lap total race in Spa. If you look up 2021, you will see a lot of drivers will have decimals in their scoring for the year because of that shortened race. So you actually have to go all the way back to 2017 to get a green flag to finish, full race length Williams podium. And Carlos Sainz pulled it off. It is awesome. After we hinted at after McLaren qualifying further down, honestly, that was the thing I was watching for most because Carlos Sainz was starting on the front row alongside Max Verstappen. All my eyes were on, can Williams pull this off? And they did. So, I'm a McLaren fan. You're a McLaren fan, but it's hard not to cheer for Williams. Their drivers are likable. Their underdog kind of mentality and status is awesome. I was stoked.
Oh, yeah, and so was James Vowles. Just the look on his face. There, after the interesting mishap in practice where James was looking extremely confused as to why Carlos was pulling into the Alpine pits, by the end of that race weekend, just ear-to-ear smiles. And I'm really happy about it. And Josh isn't here to defend Ferrari at the moment, but I think it says a lot that Carlos can get onto the podium in a Williams before Lewis can get there in a
I
Ferrari.
mean, we've talked about it on the podcast plenty of, obviously not like for like, but the two very successful. Obviously, Lewis is the greatest of all time, statistically, especially most wins, most pole, all of this stuff. Him and Carlos Sainz were the two race-winning drivers who made big switches. Lewis goes from Mercedes to Ferrari, which he was at Mercedes for over a decade. He had been running Mercedes engines both there and at McLaren, so his whole career up until this year. Carlos Sainz, still Ferrari's most recent race winner, but very, very capable at Ferrari. Almost was able to pull out the Constructors' Championship last year. He gets bumped because of Lewis. He goes to Williams, which obviously not quite as like for like as Mercedes Ferrari. It's a little bit of a downgrade, but you're going to get the comparison because both of them were struggling in their new setups and their new teams, all of that. And yeah, maybe Josh chose not to be here because he knew this was going to come up, but it definitely, even though again, not super comparable, it definitely is not a good look that Carlos Sainz just pulled a podium out of a Williams car before Lewis Hamilton has stepped on the podium for Ferrari in a Grand Prix.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, this was not a normal weekend. I would say by any means, it was not, what I'd expect, especially with, partial to McLaren. At the same time, this was a race, and we'll get into our track takes eventually, where I just really think that just totally shook up the status quo in all regards. So I wouldn't look into it too heavily in terms of the long-term implications, right? But it does set a new standard of what these teams are capable of, right? Because you set yourself up for the success. You catch the break by making it there, right? At the same time, yeah, it was just a wild weekend. I don't even know what word would best describe how all this ended up, but
Absolutely
chaotic.
insane. I mean, it was the most red flags in a Formula One qualifying session ever, at least in its current format. There were 6 different drivers that crashed out. It was absolutely nuts. But another thing we've said on the podcast a ton is, in this sport, luck is part of the sport, but you have to be good enough to capitalize on that luck. Just because Carlos Sainz got P2 in qualifying, amid all the craziness, he still had to hold off McLaren's, who never showed face, Ferrari, who never showed face. Mercedes was the real threat. I think I caught on to in the broadcast right before the formation lap that they talked about how the track was fairly cool, and I was like, oh, watch for Mercedes, because that's normally, if it's too hot for their car, that's normally where they struggle. But if it's in the right window, spot on. But, to talk about this qualifying just a tiny, tiny bit, Carlos didn't crash. Oscar Piastri crashed. Charles Leclerc crashed. Lando hit the wall, was able to finish his one lap in Q3, but hit the wall on his lap. Lewis Hamilton didn't make it to Q3. He was out in Q2. So you got to keep the wheels on the track. He did, and albeit, he sets a lap before Charles's crash when everything gets red flagged, and then later Oscar Piastri crashes out, red flagged again. But he sets that lap early enough. Max Verstappen took pole by almost half a second. Like, Max proved that, Max was not getting beaten by anybody in qualifying. He's almost built for these chaotic sessions. But that proves that the time was there. Other drivers could have pipped Carlos Sainz's time. He just put in such a good lap at the beginning of qualifying. It held up. Like we said, George Russell drove mega, made his mediums, I believe, either mediums or hards, go extra long. Great pit stop. Passed him in the pits, but Kimi Antonelli was breathing down his neck, the other Mercedes, like trying to keep up, and Carlos didn't put a foot wrong. Like, absolutely deserved. You take what luck you can get. That's how Alpine got a double podium last year.
Yeah, but, fair enough. And just real quick, I mean, if it were not, sorry, we already got 6 red flags. That's brand new record, insane. But at the same time, Carlos was sitting on provisional pole with the clock run out. Max is on his last lap. If there was one more crash, then Carlos could have been sitting on pole. Like, that's how volatile that was too.
I will say that was the one thing when I like gave my terrible race rating, nothing happened. Once Max got pulled by so much, once I knew, because it's like right behind him, P2 was Carlos Sainz on the grid. P3 was Liam Lawson. It wasn't until P4 that you got a Mercedes, a big four car. Carlos Sainz is smart. Liam Lawson is smart. Like, their race was not with Max Verstappen. And so I kind of knew going into the race that without another challenger right at the top, that Max was just going to storm off, because it wasn't in the other front of the grid sitters. It wasn't in their interest to pick a battle there and mess up the rest of the race. But we've talked a little bit about it, just to quickly go through all of the stat sheet, if you will. So Max Verstappen runs away with it, wins the race by 14 seconds. Right behind him, George Russell goes from the second row from fourth up to P2. Carlos Sainz, as we mentioned, the hero of the day. More on him later, of course. He hangs on to P3 for Williams' first podium in years. Kimi Antonelli grabs fourth, a great result for him. There were a lot of great results. Liam Lawson, career best fifth finish. Yuki Tsunoda, P6 in the Red Bull. That's the best he's looked in the Red Bull all year by far. Lando Norris started P7, stayed P7. Charles Leclerc right behind him. Hamilton made it up into the points to P9, and Hadjar grabbed the final point, which also means double points for VCARB. So job well done. Alex Albon, the other Williams, he was the first to crash out in qualifying and bring out a red flag. He was actually the only real driver to make multiple moves on track and really be able to push through. Again, we know the Williams was good enough for a podium, so maybe that offset there, but he did pick up a 10-second penalty for hitting Colapinto, but that didn't affect his finishing in P11. And then, kind of hand in hand, Alonso got a 5-second penalty for a false start. So would have Oscar Piastri if he didn't crash out on lap one. So this was weird. Maybe you have more to say on this. This was uncharacteristic of Oscar. He crashed in qualifying. He hit the wall in practice. He just blatantly just dropped the clutch and just completely jumped the start. So he lurched, stopped, and then went going. So he immediately fell to the back of the grid. Fernando Alonso picked up the penalty because he was right behind Oscar. So he sees Oscar move in front, and it's so instinct and timing based that he reacts to Oscar, picks up the penalty. Oscar would have gotten the penalty, but I think trying to make things happen because he just fell all the way to last, tries to take an outside line. It's still dusty. That's not the racing line. Lap one goes straight into the barriers, brings out the safety car. But that's like that's the only DNF. That's the only safety car. That's like really the only chaos that carried over from Saturday into the race. But very unusual for Oscar Piastri, because this track last year was his most impressive win. An incredible late lunge, late breaking move on Charles, and then holding off Charles for half the race or more last year to grab his second F1 win. So you thought he'd have the confidence there, and it just didn't show up.
Yeah, it is a bit uncharacteristic in our more immediate time frame. I think what we have to remember is that Oscar's still young. I'm not saying that he's not experienced. He's obviously experienced enough to be leading this championship, and not only that, but helping McLaren just absolutely blow all the other teams out of the water. I do think though that maybe his nerves got to him at first when he had that crash in qualifying, and then it just spiraled. I mean, to be honest, it was just one mistake after another. And I was watching the replays of him sitting there, just everyone else is just going, and is anti-stall, and then he's back into it, and then anti-stall again. And it was also, I think, a tough one for Fernando. But before I get to that, I mean, I just think that Oscar is still young. He's still going to have these moments. He's going to learn a lot from this weekend, and probably not let this kind of thing happen again. But I don't think he's had enough experience in this high position to be prone to it. I mean, Max has had his moments, right? And Max is a little bit more experienced, and he's overcome some tough moments like this. So it was uncharacteristic of Oscar as we know him currently. But in the larger scheme of his career, I think this is just one of those bumps in the road that he kind of almost had to have. But yeah,
He's gonna certainly learn from it. I'm sure we'll talk about it
yeah,
more in a little bit, given that it's our team. But all of McLaren has a lot to learn from this weekend because it was scrappy, it was ugly, it was without a doubt their worst weekend so far this season. But it gave us some other interesting storylines, and whether it's about the race, whether it's about the season, Matt, I'm gonna go right back to time for our track takes. What's your big observation? What's your takeaway from this weekend?
I don't know if this is along the lines of what we want to say, but honestly, the first thing that came to my mind was that this Grand Prix showed us that the old midfield label doesn't really fit the way it used to, and now every weekend to me feels like a genuine free for all behind McLaren for the constructors. It was Williams on podium for the first time in years. V-Carb double points again. Ferrari, yes, they were in the double points, but they're they should expect to be better than V-Carb, and not sitting in that position was really interesting to me. I don't think necessarily that the P2 spot is up for just any team to pick up, but the whole midfield label, both when it comes to drivers and teams, is something that we can't say the same way that we could in 2023.
I mean, I have to green flag this. We hear any interview with any team principal every week, the line, "This is the most competitive Formula One has ever been," comes up, and it's true. 3/4 of the grid has a podium, not just points here, points there, a podium. Obviously, not all this season, but I mean, I don't know the full history of F1, but I have to imagine that that is the highest, if not, or at least one of the highest kind of ratios.
Oh
But
yeah,
you hear it also with people saying, oh, weekends are determined during qualifying because track position is so important. Well, if that's the case, then, everybody's got to step up in qualifying. We've seen sessions where top to bottom of qualifying is separated by less than a second, 7/10, half a second, things like that. It's impressive, but it shows you how important track position is. We've also seen, less so this year because Williams is becoming a more rounded team, but we used to know, oh, Williams is a rocket ship on the straights. They're going to be bad most of the year, and then they're going to pull up to Monza and double both cars in the top six, because they're just absolute rocket ships there. And so we've known, I mean, McLaren generally has a rocket ship now, but for
yeah.
years now, McLaren's strength is not their top speed, which means they struggle on long straights and where there's low downforce. They use high downforce tracks. They use their incredible technology to just get better grip, and while doing so, not overheating their tires. And when you go to the opposite of that, McLaren has to fight with everybody else, and they did not get it right at all. But I think you're spot on. It is awesome to see. Maybe it's not as crazy as last year in terms of how many different race winners, but now we've got a Hadjar podium. We've got an Antonelli podium. He's another rookie. Nico Hulkenberg, legendary podium in a Sauber. And now you have another, as you said, quote unquote, if it's even fair, midfield team with Carlos Sainz getting a podium for Williams, which I just want to shout out. My track take after the Dutch Grand Prix was that Williams would get to 100 points this year. And it only took them 2 more races to hit that mark. Alex Albon does well. Last race in the Italian Grand Prix, Carlos Sainz bags 15 points, which is 1 point less than all he had scored prior to this weekend this season. And now they're at 101 points. So I'm not saying I called it, but it's impressive. A team like Williams is in triple-digit points now, which is so, so awesome. And sticking with Williams, my track take is that Alex Albon is also going to find a way onto the podium this year. I
Okay.
heard some interviews with James Vowles after the race. Obviously, things have to go right. We've talked about how chaotic this weekend is, but he was straight up. He was like, well, Singapore is not going to suit us well, but Brazil is, and Vegas is, and the US is, and Mexico is. And so they feel confident going into more of the races remaining than ones that they don't feel confident going in. And sometimes this is what the team needs. Carlos Sainz has grabbed a podium in the Williams. Why can't they do this more often? Like, the belief is fully there. They've believed in their team. Again, chaos happens. Nico Hulkenberg wouldn't be on the podium without chaos. Isaac Hadjar, there's obviously merit involved in here too, but on paper, no midfield team should ever come close to the podium. Like, on
True.
paper, the top 8 should always be taken up by McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull in whatever order that weekend decides. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing top 5 finishes. We're seeing podium finishes. So why not Albon? I mean, the Williams is good enough for it here. I could see it absolutely happening another time this season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if can't invent flags. But I don't know, like a lime green flag would be like the way I would call this, because I think that Albon is absolutely capable of getting on the podium. Now the problem is are they going to be able to capitalize on the same kind of chaos they were able to capitalize with here? Think about if Oscar had not crashed in qualifying, where would they be sitting, right? And it's not to take any credit away from Williams. I just think that Albon's definitely capable of getting some more top 5 finishes. I don't know if I see him getting onto the podium necessarily, but I would not put it past them. I do think it's possible.
We certainly will see. We've got 7 races to go, but I'm going to jump right into my top. I'm all on the Williams train right now, so I'm just going to keep running with it because it picks it up. It's easy to give the top to Carlos Sainz. It's obviously so deserved. He's driver of the day. I just saw a video on Instagram that he was flying home to Nice, to Monaco, with Charles Leclerc. Their flight had to be diverted because of weather. And so Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc rented a van, and Carlos Sainz was driving them back to Nice from Italy. So not only driver of the day, but driver of the night too. Shout out Carlos Sainz. But my top has got to be all of Williams, because this has been building up for a long time. But at the same time, they're exceeding expectations. They've talked about diverting resources to next year. James Vowles, when he signed Carlos Sainz, was like, you're going to struggle. This team still has some growing pains. Not even 26, but 27, 28 is really when we can start make a push. Maybe that's when they really find consistency and they're regularly competing for these podiums. But, I mean, they're ahead of schedule for sure. But they're so freaking likable. I mean, not only does Alex Albon come up and congratulate Carlos after he gets out of the car, Alex Albon hops over the barriers and is standing with all the mechanics and James Vowles and the team while Carlos Sainz is on the podium. And I'm sure Alex is thinking what could have been. He's been by far the better Williams driver this year. He has 70 of the 101 points for Williams. I'm sure in his head there's the thought of shoulda, woulda, coulda. It could have been him on the podium. But no, he's standing there with the team celebrating. He's been the senior driver, if you will, in that team. And so even if it's not him, he's just so happy for the team. That team is such a team, which feels silly to say, but how can you not root for them?
No, I mean, I have to agree. And they're underdogs too. I mean, they're the little guy that if you're getting into Formula One and you don't want to be a bandwagon, I mean, trust me, when I started choosing McLaren, it was not because I expected us to be doing this well this year.
I like neon colors and I like their road cars. That's why I picked them. So
okay, yeah, for me it was Bruce McLaren's story, current driver lineup, and the fact that they are the only group that actually made a middle seater road supercar called the F1. It just absolutely blows my mind. Y'all go look that up. Go Google it. That is like my dream car. But yeah, no, I have to agree on Williams, and that was Carlos's first smooth operation in Williams, but not the last, as he put it. Yeah, I mean,
did you notice, like after, I think it was before the podium, like when he was getting out of the car, the trackside DJ you could hear on the broadcast was playing Smooth Operator over all the speakers. So clearly the memes have percolated well into the Formula One world.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, I love to see that. And, I think another really good performance, my top, I think I want to give a hand to Liam Lawson. I just have seen the kid struggle. I mean, this is his third season racing in F1, but it's still technically his rookie season because he hasn't gotten this kind of time, right? So I think, qualifying P3, converting it into a P5 finish with some of those other really big names on his tail ahead of Norris and Leclerc, like he was quiet for a lot of the race, but highly efficient and highly effective. And he helped me get my hot take. So thank you, Liam. But also just congrats on a great performance. And really, just after all the adversity that I think he's faced in, was it AlphaTauri and was he V-Carb last year? Or was that Red Bull? I know that he's had some different
V-Carb
shots.
last year,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously all of 2 races in Red Bull.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just he hasn't gotten too many lucky breaks, and I think this is a good one. But he also deserved it. So good job, Liam.
I think all of the things you said also deserve to go to Yuki Tsunoda. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's almost the joke of the week in Formula One is just Red Bull's second seat. That car being undrivable for anybody but Max. And Yuki knows more than the half of it now. He has absolutely struggled. This is far and away his most complete performance because not only did he finish P6, which is best of the year, especially with Red Bull, it was Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris right behind him, down his throat. And, maybe Liam Lawson, I think I'm surprised it didn't get talked about, especially when one of the highlights of the day was Carlos Sainz. But if you remember, the one person to win a race other than a Red Bull driver in 2023, the most dominant F1 season of all time, was Carlos Sainz in Singapore, and he intentionally kept Lando Norris in DRS so that the Mercedes behind Lando, George Russell, and then Lewis couldn't catch him. Liam Lawson, I'm surprised this didn't get talked about. Liam Lawson kept Yuki in DRS in a similar fashion. I don't know if it was the team suggesting it. I don't know if it was Liam's situational awareness, but it was clear that Yuki would briefly fall out of DRS, and then what do you know? He's back to 8/10 behind Liam Lawson. So Yuki always had DRS to help defend from Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, and it helped them both out. It helped the Red Bull family out with a P5 and a P6. But we talked about Lando Norris finishing behind everybody. We talked about Charles finishing behind everybody. It was not a good look for some. So Matt, your flop of the week. We gotta throw some shade.
This is an obvious one that we talked about earlier, and I think I don't want to be down on the McLaren team, so let me just pick something else. Charles Leclerc. Let's go, Charles. Not to say that he had the worst performance ever, but crashing out in Q3, it was the last four races in Baku that he's pulled. Didn't even get close this time. I mean, maybe he was close enough to be possibly there in Q3. But this was his chance to say, okay, well, I can finally win Baku after all the times I've gotten pole and not won. And just, again, maybe it wasn't even as fun of a crash this time. The whole turn 8 crash with I'm Stupid was such a funny meme. But I don't know. I mean, I've been tough on Ferrari recently. I do think that even if maybe we expanded it and just talk about Ferrari in general, because Lewis is now, again, like we mentioned, yet to get a podium at Ferrari, and Carlos has already done that with Williams. I expected more from them, and I can't trash my own team.
I mean, I'm gonna trash them for us. Don't worry, because somebody's got to. But I mean, McLaren, they had a chance to lock up the Constructors' Championship this weekend. They didn't. They will likely do so in Singapore. But Ferrari's in the middle of the battle. They are now back to P3 in the Constructors' Championship. The podium and P4 for Russell and Antonelli, respectively, now has Mercedes just a few points ahead, back in the P2 slot. And they're so neck and neck. It really is just whoever gets the better of these 7 races. I mean, it sounds obvious to say, but it's not a done deal for Ferrari. Even with everything, even with the couple highs they've had and whatnot, it's just not materialized. But I'm flopping McLaren, dude. I got to. I literally have in my notes, first bullet point, straight doo-doo cheeks is what I wrote.
Oh, my.
I mean, it's bad on the surface, and I keep looking, and it's worse because it's like Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris both hit the wall during practice. Lando only got 3 laps in FP2 because he destroyed his rear suspension. So the mechanics repair that. And then in qualifying, Oscar hits the wall. Red flags, has to start in P9 because he doesn't get to set a time in Q3. Lando Norris scrapes the wall in his lap, which hurts his time, and he's all the way down in P7, which, I mean, hindsight 2020, but you go back and look, and the mistake was having Lando be the first one to run that final lap in qualifying because the times were dropping. Lando was the one exposed to the slipperiest track before, hot tires were running over the racing line. And if you look at the other times in qualifying and when they were running, it was all the guys further back. But even more shocking, Lando Norris's fastest qualifying time was in Q1. He got slower every session qualifying. And I know I'm talking about slipperiness because, there was some rain during some of the red flags. So obviously it wasn't as perfect as it was at the beginning of qualifying, but other drivers improved and Lando didn't. Oscar, look, we already talked about, crashed out. So the mechanics get to repair that again. And then half a lap in, Oscar has both false started, fall into the back, and crashed out, which we've already talked about. Super uncharacteristic. This is now 4 straight races that Lando Norris has gotten a slow pit stop. So you can never really tell how the race is going to unfold. Obviously, when you come out of the pits, your tires aren't fully warm, and so you're more susceptible, more vulnerable to a car right behind you to sneak in and overtake because you don't have the grip yet. But there's a chance that, so it was a 4.1 second pit stop this time, which if McLaren does what they've done a couple times this year and are put in a pit stop around 2 seconds flat, he might come out in front of Yuki Tsunoda and Charles Leclerc.
Yeah.
And then who knows, maybe he can get to Liam Lawson and get past. There's definitely a chance that P5 is on the table for Lando, which is still probably considered a failure by McLaren. A single P5 with the other driver crashed out, the only DNF. And so, to me, the frustrating thing is I think that there was some level of debate coming into this weekend of, is this year's McLaren more dominant than the Red Bull was in 2023? And no, already, the Red Bull got, I think, 21 of 22 wins that season. So that type of ratio wasn't going to happen this year. But with 2 very talented drivers, McLaren was and still is on the trajectory of setting the record for most points by a constructor in a season. So if you go off that metric, you could say, oh, well, they're the most dominant because they got the most points. This race, to me, basically sealed the deal that 2023 was a more dominant Formula One season.
Fair.
Red Bull had a very rare, not even really a mistake, because 2023, they were just bad in Singapore. They just had the setup wrong. But especially recently with some of the pit stops, McLaren is it's like they played with their food too much. They're so far ahead in the constructors that it's almost like they relaxed a little bit. And I think to your track take all the way earlier in the podcast when you were saying that, is it fair to call them midfield anymore? Even if you're the best team, if you are bad on a weekend, you will get punished for it. This is not a good showing for McLaren. It's by far the worst of the season. We've seen instances this year. Again, maybe it's car problems. Maybe it's not, mechanic errors or strategy errors, things like that. We've seen Max Verstappen wind up with 1 point at the end, Red Bull as a whole with 1 point at the end of a race weekend.
Yep.
So nobody's immune to this. And I don't think you can call, dominant was, the reason Red Bull was so dominant was every race, fastest car, fastest pit stops, perfect strategy. Max could have won the Constructors' Championship by himself that year. That's nuts. And I know there's a larger gap between him and, at the time, Checo Perez, now Yuki Tsunoda, than Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. We've seen the perks of having 2 very competent drivers, but you can't be called dominant and then have weekends like this. It's just It's too much of a juxtaposition. So I love my team. I'm going to keep cheering for my team. At least only 6 points, but the Constructors' Championship is now a 25-point gap with Oscar leading as opposed to the 31-point gap that we started the weekend with. So there's the plus there. It's still coming down. If Lando picks up 6 points every weekend, there's still enough time that he would be the one on top at the end of the season. So there's still all to play for. But, oh boy, they cannot wait for the next race to come and just erase this one because it was rough.
Yeah.
Rant over.
For the papaya, just not a great weekend. And I knew one of us would have to say it, so thank you for taking that.
Hey, if we're gonna loudmouth it up when they do secure Constructors Championship, when one of our drivers does come away with the Drivers Championship, we were both McLaren fans. You say bandwagon earlier. We were both McLaren fans when they were bad. So we have every right to soak it in when they're doing well, but you gotta call a spade a spade. You know how it is. But unfortunately for McLaren, it's not a doubleheader. They have a week off. And then we go to Singapore under the lights. It is one of the most iconic, one of the most unique races. It's also one of the most punishing. The high heat, the humidity, even after hours, is nuts. So it's usually an outlier too. We talked about Carlos Sainz being that only non-Red Bull driver to win a race, and that was Singapore 2 years ago. So we will get there eventually. We will have a preview episode before where Josh, the owner, the possessor, the organizer of our very own Predictors Championship, will have the updated score. I'm sorry I don't have it for you this episode, this time, but there's still a lot of season left. We're going to keep reiterating it. Whether it's Saturday, whether it's Sunday, there's something to get excited about in Formula One. There's such great storylines. There's not even a midfield anymore, as Matt said. Everybody is fighting for it, and it's so great to see. So thank you for tuning in with us. Thus far, there's still 7 races to go, though, so we hope you keep listening in through the rest of the 2025 season. We will talk to you before the Singapore Grand Prix, but until then, everybody, stay speedy.
Stay speedy.
Goodbye.